Okay, so welcome to the screencast for week 4. We're going to talk about copyright and fair use first. And so, what are some things that you should know as a teacher about copyright? So, this is a really great overview. I've included the link in the actual PowerPoint so that you can, or not the PowerPoint, in the actual screencast that you're watching right now. So you can click on all of these different questions and explore. But basically, when we're talking about copyright, we're talking about the actual works of authors, artists, or composers, or others, even educators, and that was created in order to protect people's rights. So other people can't use it without permission. So the next question to use, there are lots of different things that you can talk about or talk about these particular questions. Doesn't the public have a right to use music and art? And yes, in fact, they do. And what happens is eventually it comes into the rights of the public. So copyright law only lasts for a certain amount of time before it actually goes into the public domain. But the person has to be able to benefit from that particular copyright for at least a while. Otherwise, people wouldn't make creative materials. So again, public domain are things that are not copyright protected. However, you still should give credit to the source. So a lot of these things, like a lot of the works of art that are older, so like Shakespeare, none of those are copyrighted anymore. But those you still have to attribute credit to those particular sources. And so let's talk about fair use. So fair use is this special thing that applies to educators, and it applies to some other different things like satire and things like that. But fair use allows you to use a limited amount of copyrighted material for educational purposes. And so here are the 4 questions that the bee is so annoyingly going up and down on. Does it have a non-profit educational purpose? Meaning, would you be using it for non-monetary purposes, and for educational purposes too? And then what kind of material do you want to use? Do you want to use artistic things, or is it facts and figures? Because that makes a difference. Are you only using a small portion of it, or are you using the whole thing? The smaller portions that you use, the more likely it is to be fair use. And will your use deprive the author from making money? Because that's, again, in the long run, the way that we're measuring copyright. So you can explore those a little bit more if you're interested in some of the other question, because they talk about how much can you actually use. So there are different rules for different sources of media. So if you're going to use motion media, which is video, you can use 10% or up to 3 minutes, whichever is less. For text material, same thing, 10% or up to 1,000 words, again, whichever one is less. For music, lyrics, and so forth, you can use up to 10%, but no more than 30 seconds of an individual work. So this is really important because it talks about those particular things that are going to be more likely to be considered fair use. Now, the important thing to note is that when we're talking about fair use, really the only time that you really know if something isn't copyrighted or if it's fair use would be if somebody kind of takes you to court after you've done something, maybe after you've used some kind of educational material, and the judge will rule on whether or not it's fair use. So the best way for you to do that is to protect yourself and lean towards more things that are going to be copyright free, or that are going to be fair use appropriate. So again, going back over these in terms of text material, motion, media, music, and illustrations or photographs, you can use no more than 5 images from one particular artist. So these are good things to know. This will be available in our PowerPoint, and it's also available in the links, so you can explore those later on. So next I want to share this quick video with you. It's really fantastic. It provides a great overview of copyright and fair use.
In today's digital world, it's easier than ever to copy, paste, mash up, remix, download, and publish content. People's writing, artwork, videos, and images can be inspiring, but they're also easy to take without thinking twice. When people treat the internet like a free-for-all, legal and ethical situations can arise. That's why it's important to know about copyright and fair use. It would help you give and receive credit where credit is due. So what's a copyright? Copyright law protects your control over the creative work you make. It requires people to get your permission before they copy, rework, or share what you make. Most things that you find, download, and copy and paste from the internet are copyrighted. That doesn't mean that everything online is on lockdown and can't be used. It can, as long as you check who owns it, get permission to use it, give credit to the creator, buy it if necessary, and use it responsibly, then you're not stealing. Now, there are times when you can use a small part of someone else's copyrighted work without permission or paying a fee. This is called fair use. Fair use only applies when using content in certain instances: schoolwork and education, news reporting, criticizing or commenting, and comedy or parody. Specific guidelines, what we call the 4 points of fair use, must also be followed. First, you can only use a small amount of the work. Second, you have to add new meaning to the work to make it original. Third, you need to rework it and use it in a totally different way. Finally, you have to use it for nonprofit purposes. In other words, you can't make money off of your new creation. No matter what, it's a good idea to give credit to the creator of the work you use. It's just a sign of respect. So what should you do if you find something online that you want to use? As a rule of thumb, check who owns it, get permission to use it, give credit to the creator, buy it if necessary, and use it responsibly, which means judging for fair use. You're a creator, innovator, and inspirer. Think twice about your rights and responsibilities in our online culture, and then pay it forward.
Okay, so that was a really great video, a great overview. And that was done by Common Sense. And so I want to point out to you here that they have a Creative Commons license that says that you have to attribute them and it cannot be used for commercial purposes. And you can't do derivatives of it. It has to be exactly this video. So that's what we did. We're incorporating exactly this video. We're not editing it. We just want to use it because it's a great example of fair use principles. So again, when we're talking about fair use, there are these 4 different points that you need to kind of consider. The purpose and character of the use of the copyrighted work, the nature of the copyrighted work, the amount that you're going to use, and we already talked about the amount quite a bit, and then the effect of the use upon the potential market for or the value of the copyrighted work. There are 2 really good resources here. The first one is the Fair Use Quiz, so I encourage you to go out and look at that particular quiz. It's a really great one that MIT created. And then I wanted to take you through this one for just a moment. And this one is the fair use checklist. So we can kind of go through those 4 points, and this will say on the left-hand side, this is favoring fair use, and on the right-hand side, those are the things that are opposing fair use, meaning that you're more likely to be violating the fair use principles if you're on this side as opposed to on this side. So the first one is if making sure that you're using it for actual teaching purposes and that it's nonprofit. So in terms of like the teaching principles for this, so Finding Nemo, you couldn't use Finding Nemo to just show on a Friday afternoon. If you're using Finding Nemo in order to showcase the different ecosystems that exist within the ocean, that's a different element. Or if you're using it to talk about stories and plot lines and things like that and having your students do it at the end. Those are important differences. It has to be teaching. It has to focus on the teaching element of it. So there are other things, if you're doing something in a parody or criticism or even for news reporting, those are things that favor fair use. Next is the nature. So is the nature of the actual work, is it, if it's highly creative works like an art, like a play or a novel or poetry, things like that, that is opposing fair use, and that gets really, really tricky in that particular element. If something is factual or non-fictional based, or if it's already published work, or if it's important to favored educational objectives, these are all elements that will lean more towards being fair use. We already talked a lot about the amount, or I showed you different examples of the different amounts. So if you're using the whole thing, then that's going to be less likely to be supported by fair use. And then finally, the effect. So if you're just making one or few copies, or if you make some copies this year to kind of try out a book and then you decide to purchase it the following year, that's more likely to be fair use, as opposed to if you just make copies of it and use that over and over again. Okay, so that's the basic elements of fair use and copyright. We have Creative Commons license here, which is what I showed you at the bottom of that page, at the bottom of the video that was shown. And with this one, we want to make sure that that we're looking at all of these different elements. Which ones do we think are important or not important? Is it important to always get attribution? The ones that are higher up are public domain, and you can use them and you don't have to use copyright. And then it goes down from there in terms of more and more stringent. So those are things that are important, and you'll be actually applying a Creative Commons license to your items.